Hi, in this video I'll be reading a short story from a book called The British History of Castles and Knights. At the moment I'm located in a small village in Warwickshire and I'm just stood outside this little Castle Folly. It is a fantastic location and the weather is really nice and sunny this Wednesday morning. But all I want to do is read a quick story for you. So, the introduction. Massive stone castles still tower over the landscapes of the British Isles, guarding lonely mountain passes, valleys and coasts, and towering over market towns that today are peaceful and quiet. They are a reminder of the violent years of the High Middle Ages. Castle building was brought to the islands by the Normans, the descendants of the Vikings, who were settled in France. They conquered England in 1066 and were soon carving out lordships on the Welsh borders, settling in southern Scotland and invading Ireland. The most important Norman soldiers were armed horsemen, and these knights soon became powerful members of society. The Middle Ages were troubled times when the common people suffered greatly from hunger and disease and were forced to toil on the land. Kings ruled their lands with force and were often prepared to use it even against members of their own family. Challenges to royal rule from other sections of society came in the form of violent uprisings, the limiting of royal power through laws and the development of parliaments. England, Wales and Scotland began to emerge as united countries. Noble families sought power through marriage alliances, and royal marriages brought the English kings and queens vast new territories in France. England was the growing power, almost perpetually at war with the French, the Welsh and the Scots. It was also trying to bring Ireland under its control. Wales suffered defeat in 1283, but England was at last forced to recognise Scottish independence in 1328. All the countries of the British Isles saw themselves as part of Christendom, a Europe united by the Christian faith and headed by the Pope in Rome. Christian knights repeatedly went to war against Islamic armies in the Near East and in Spain. Christian monks and nuns were engaged in teaching and caring for the sick, and in copying out beautiful illustrated texts by hand. New inventions entered Europe from Asia, along with imported silks and spices. The first universities were founded. Languages of the British Isles, such as English, Welsh, Scots and Irish Gaelic, began to take on forms we could recognise today and use more widely, alongside Latin and Norman French. Poetry and literature flourished, and many of the texts glorified the life of the knights and their ladies and the code of honour they were supposed to follow. This idea of chivalry was never more than a dream, but it was one which would inspire many future generations in the British Isles. Hastings, 1066. In the summer of 1066, a large fleet assembled along the French coast. Its commander was William, Duke of Normandy. Ships wallowed at anchor in choppy seas, waiting for the northerly wind to turn. Norman lords galloped to and fro on horseback. Carts trundled along the beach, loaded with spears, swords, arrows and axes, iron helmets, shields and coats of mail. This would be the last major invasion of England in the Middle Ages. Claims for the throne. Harold of Wessex was the son of a powerful Anglo-Saxon earl called Godwin. In January 1066, the Witan named Harold as King of England, but their decision was challenged at once. Edward, the Atheling, nephew of Edward the Confessor, claimed the throne. So did Harold's own brother Tostig. A third claimant was King Harold III of Norway, known as Hardrade the Ruthless. The fourth was William of Normandy. William swore that in 1064 Harold had made a solemn vow to support the Norman claim. Harold II's troops were waiting for the Normans when word came that Harold III of Norway had joined forces with Tostig. Harold marched northwards at speed. He defeated and killed them both at Stamford Bridge near York. Just 3 days later, Norman troops landed in Sussex. Harold had to march his exhausted army south again. On 14th of October 1066, the two great armies clashed at Senlac Hill near Hastings. All day, wave after wave of Normans broke against the Anglo-Saxon shields. Harold's men stood firm, but scenting victory, they broke rank too soon. The victory belonged to William the Conqueror. The Conquest. On Christmas Day 1066, William I was crowned king in Westminster Abbey. Within months of his coronation, William ordered the buildings of a new fortification by the River Thames in London. Its great keep, or stronghold, was the White Tower. This became the centre of the Tower of England. Within 2 years, most of England was under his control. Revolts led by Edward and Atheling, an Anglo-Saxon lord called Hereward the Wake, were crushed. The Domesday Book. Exactly 19 years after his coronation, William I announced that all the lands in England south of rivers Ribble and Tees, and excluding the cities of London and Winchester, were to be registered in the Great Book. From 1086 onwards, royal officials travelled from one estate to another. They wrote down the details of buildings, land and resources so that they could be taxed. The Mailed Fist. The Norman kings of England and their successors wanted to be recognised as overlords of all the British Isles. Their fleets sailed north and their armies were soon battling with the Scots. Norman warlords were given territories on the Welsh borders, the Marches, and stormed into North and South Wales. Within 100 years, their great castles of stone could be seen in Ireland too. The Normans in Scotland. After repeated Scottish invasions of his new kingdom, William I marched into Lothian at the head of a large army in 1071, but he made peace with Malcolm Canmore at Abernethy. In 1092, the Normans took Cumbria from the Scots, but a full-scale invasion of Scotland never occurred. Norman settlers did arrive, bringing their ways to the lowlands and to the Scottish court. Later, Scottish kings, including Robert Bruce and the Stuarts, were of Norman descent. Wales and the Marches. The Norman kings did not intend to rule Wales directly, but they wished to control it. As early as 1067, William I gave land on the borders to William Fitzhusband, Roger Montgomery and Hugh de Avranches. These Marcher lords were lords of themselves. They launched savage raids into North Wales in the 1080s. By the 1090s, Norman warlords were gaining large control of large areas of South and West Wales. They met fierce resistance, but this was a period when the Welsh kingdoms were at war with each other. The Normans were defeated in 1096 at Gelly Carnant, Gwent, but they kept their foothold in Wales. Strongbows Island. In Ireland, warring between provincial kings gave a chance for descendants of the Normans to invade. In 1166, Dermot MacMurrough, King of Leinster, appealed to Henry II of England for help. He had lost his land in the wars between Ireland's provincial kings. Henry authorised Norman lords to carry on their fight independently. In 1169, Richard Fitz Gilbert de Clare, Earl of Pembroke, agreed to help Dermot in return for land. De Clare, half Norman and half Welsh, was known as Strongbow. His invasion of Ireland was successful. Too much so for Henry II, who was jealous of Strongbow's newfound power. The English king and his army arrived in Ireland in 1171. The division of society into classes of serfs, free men, nobles and rulers has started earlier in the Middle Ages. The Normans were the first to enforce this feudal system rigidly. The king was at the top, ruling by the will of God. He parcelled out land to his lords in return for their support. The land was worked by free men and serfs, who provided nobles with food and served in the armies. In return, the poor were in theory at least protected by their lord. Oaths of loyalty. The feudal system was a series of two-way contracts, reinforced by oaths of loyalty. The loyalty was not to a nation, but to a noble or royal family. A lord could even insist that his people take up arms against their own countrymen. The feudal system crossed national borders. Europe's ruling class was allied with each other rather than the peasants who worked for them. If a king from one royal family married the princess of another, the lands they ruled might be joined together regardless of public opinion or geography. Rich and the poor. The Norman lords who had supported William I during the invasion of England profited hugely. They were rather like lottery winners of today, only the newfound wealth was based on land rather than money. This created problems for kings that followed, for there were many very powerful lords who would challenge their rule. At the other end of the scale were their villains. They had to labour on the lord's land for, say, 3 days a week. They also had to pay taxes and supply farm produce to the lord. The church too demanded 1/10 of their harvested crops. Women in the Middle Ages. In the medieval Middle Ages period, most women in Europe had few rights. Strict vows bound together man and wife, just as society was bound by oaths of feudal loyalty. It was the men who held real power and wealth. Despite this, many women were strong characters and became widely respected in their own right. They were powerful queens and noble women, abbesses and nuns, scholars and poets, and able working women in every village. In the later Middle Ages, poets began to sing the praises of women, but in a very idealised way. I just want to perhaps apologise for some of the names. I might not have got them quite right. I hadn't pre-read the story, but I've really enjoyed reading that story, Castles and Knights. So I just want to show you the outside, and as you can see, this is where I'm staying at the moment. Absolutely stunning location, especially with the weather as it is at the moment. And there's a little pond next to it. So I just wanted to quickly show you that, just pop the camera back down. So I just wanted to say, I hope you enjoyed the story. Thank you for joining me.